this, it's on. Woohoo! Hello, everybody. Somebody type to Jared who's done this before so we can see that the chat box is working. I can move some of the junk. Meh.
Right now we only have 3 people.
3 people. Come on, everybody. Is everybody just waiting for the recording? We'll give people a couple more minutes. Usually
Yep, they can hear you.
Usually seconds before it's time to start. It's when we get everybody else. I know a few people that won't be here, but not that many. We're here. We're just waiting for some more people. Oh, my cup. Turn that around. And you'll have to hover over me. So actually, we might want to get it more. Well, I'll measure stuff and then we'll move the camera. Which just now went. So we're going to give everybody about 4 more minutes. Oh, good. We got a couple more.
We got 5.
Click back to that page that you were on just a second ago. Just does it let you or no? How many are there? 13. Yeah, okay. We're waiting a little bit. Let me look at those names. And the person that I am not expecting at all isn't there. So we're waiting for, oh good, there's a couple more. Ooh, numbers are swelling now. 3 more people and we'll get the ball rolling. We got a puppy. She's under the table. I hope she doesn't go too crazy. As long as she can see my feet, she seems to keep her cool. She's buried. 1, 2, 3, 4.
That's about half of them.
Almost there. We're gonna get started because we're just doing an hour-ish today. Actually, let me have my sip of water before we get going. Stay hydrated, everybody. It's very important. Okay. We're going to do a skirt with gores, and then I'm going to show you how to do a skirt with gores with a flounce on it so it like comes down and then has even more volume. And then we're going to start with just like what a basic circle skirt is, because some people emailed and said, no, we want no seams, which is more straightforward. So if we start with that, it'll help us then split a skirt into seams. So one thing when you're doing a circle skirt that you've got to think about, oh, would you grab me another one with a blade? I've got a rotary cutter with no blade. Or actually, Lauren, hand me that rotary cutter right there. So 2 things that you need to know is what's the waist or the hip. So if your skirt's a pull-on skirt, we're gonna do a bunch in half size today. If your waist or if your skirt's a pull-on skirt, you've got to have it the size of the hip or a smidge bigger. Or if you're using a stretchy material, what I usually do, like I've got some silvery, this goes back, Sabina, this piece of fabric, remember that? That's from you. Yeah. If you're making a stretch mesh shirt, which are really, really trendy right now too, I usually find a measurement that's like between the waist and the hip, and I cut the circle of my waist, the measurement between the waist and the hip, so that like it has to stretch a little bit to get over her hip, but it's not so full at the waist. So those are kind of the basics to think about. And an advantage to the stretch mesh circle skirts, this is great if you're not doing gores, if you just have like 2 half circles you're putting together, because the bias on this stuff doesn't drop like Georgette or chiffon. So if you've got like Georgette or silk or chiffon, you're going to be dealing with all the droopy bias. So one of the reasons why I'm going to show you how you could put gores in if you want is so that you don't have to worry about hemming your skirt all the time. So let's just start with just a little basic circle, the most basic circle skirt we can for this girl here. And I'm going to say that this one is going to fit her waist. So her waist is 13, and we're going to make it kind of knee length. So we're going to make this 13 by 11, a full circle. So that's what we're going to start with, is just the most basic thing we can do. Then if you guys, I'm not trying to push tools on you. We all know pi equals radius squared and stuff, but we do have this great gizmo to help you make circle skirts or circles or flounces or ruffles. And I'm going to just use it because I've got it. So I said her waist is 13. So I don't know if it shows, but this has rows of numbers, and then there's a line that says pivot point. You don't have to zoom in. There's pictures of it online. So I'm going to put the pin at the pivot point, and then I'm going to just put my pencil in 13, and that'll give me the right circumference to make a 13-inch circle. So I'm going to go over to my piece of paper here, and I'm going to just start. I'm going to start with just a quarter of a circle, because we know we should all be onto that in life already, that 4 quarters make a whole. Maybe not. If somebody's not on board with that, flag Jared down and say, back up. So I put my pin in, and I'm going to put my pencil at 13, and I'm going to just make the arc there, or the beginning of my circle, and then we're going to make it 11 inches long. So why I've got this string on here, I'm going to move my pin. So you can tie a string at the end of each of the pivot points. So I just moved it so I could get to where my string is tied on. So then I want my skirt to be 11 inches long. So I'm going to go from the line I drew first. And we'll zoom in on this here in a little bit. You could zoom in on this spot. So I'm going to go, I put my waist in. Then I'm measuring from the waist, not from my pin over here, but from my waist. And I'm going to just follow down that string until I'm at 11 inches. And then I just lasso. A ribbon works good too. And I've had a couple people tell me they got, you can get ribbon with buttonholes in it. So not buttonhole elastic, but buttonhole ribbon, like if you're making men's neckties. And they've tied that at the bottom of these so that their pencil stays right in the ribbon. So there's my hem, the length of my hem. And then we're going to do first just a quarter to start with. So now I'm going to finish up. Oop, my lines are crooked. I'm a new parent, you guys. I'm running on not enough sleep here. So now let me cut that out. So the other thing too that comes up when you're doing circle skirts is you, even if you know you can just trace it right on the fabric, which we do a lot of the time, you've got to figure out if the dimensions of your skirt fit across your fabric anyway, or if you've got to put a weird seam into it. So you need to find out, actually, I'll do this one as a half because it's easier to see what's going on. You've got to kind of find out whether or not your pattern even fits on the fabric. And I know if a lot of you have used Vogue patterns in the past, you'll often on a Vogue pattern or an evening dress pattern, you'll see these weird lines where there's like a cut across like that with 2 notches or something. What that is on like a Vogue pattern or a formal wear pattern is you could say that this is 54 inches of fabric. And if you want a giant train or like on a wedding dress, let me draw that darker. I had a Sharpie. So on a lot of commercial patterns, you'll see something like that. And that's because to get the train, the fabric isn't actually ever as wide as the train. So sometimes they'll have you piece in a piece. So that's something else to think about. Like if your fabric goods are only so wide, do you have to piece it on? Gores are helpful for fitting stuff together because then you're less likely to have to piece stuff together. But let me cut out a half circle first. And then we're going to just cut a full circle in kind of a droopy fabric so we can look at what happens when you've got the bias to deal with. And there's a The Helen Joseph Armstrong books are a really good set of books to get for draping and flat patterning. And she's really good at explaining bias. Actually, when we did this, we did a similar skirt class with Gores a couple years ago, and I was surprised the amount of people who I have known for a while that have been sewing that were completely thrown by what happens on the bias. You know, that stuff is so stretchy on the bias. Ooh, this stuff is so lightweight. It's going to be great. It's going to show so clearly all the awful things that happen when you're making a circle skirt. This is just silk charmeuse, but it's a really thin silk charmeuse. Nobody fired, it'll blow off the table. Now, so we're working in miniature, but it would be the exact same if we worked in large. We just wouldn't be able to get through anything. So I am going to just weight that down with my tape, and we'll see how good. Oh, Jared's got a new sharp blade in there. That's good. And I'll show you guys a couple ways to seam this stuff together too when we get to the gored one. So since we're in mini, I don't need to seam my side seams together. But if you were making a circle skirt with fewer seams, you would need to, no, less seams, fewer seams. Lauren, fewer. If you wanted fewer seams, you would probably put the seams that you had to at the side. So if you need a seam, put it at the side. And I am going to just slice a little bit of my fold so that we can actually drop this down onto the girl. So we're imagining that's our opening so that she can get into this. And once we pin this up here, you'll start to see some of the things that happen, and we're going to talk about ways to fix them. One thing that happens right away is, look at this. We measured our exact 13-inch circle, and look at how much larger the waist is. That's because there's a bunch of cuts across the bias. So we can, if we were putting a waistband on this, which would just be a rectangle that's double whatever our elastic is plus seam allowance, it will ease all this on really, really nice. But what you can think about is making it a little bit smaller when you initially cut it out. So we're going to cut another one that's a little bit smaller and see if we get closer to it fitting the waist at the beginning. Does that should make sense, what I'm talking about. So we're going to cut one that's like a smidge smaller because most woven fabrics grow when cut on a circle. But look at this already, the horrible things that are happening. Does that show? Get straight across from it. Here, I can lift her up too. Look at this. I haven't even messed with this dress and it's already a hot mess. So if I mark where the short part's my straight grain. So if I just come along here and mark where my straight grain is, this itty bitty 11-inch dress. So see, that's where my shortest part is. This little bitty skirt is already like 2¼ inches longer. And what happens when you keep hemming this over and over and over, because if you hemmed this for a show today and they danced in it, I guarantee by tomorrow it'll be a little bit longer, which is okay if you've got somebody to hem it every day. But we had a few shows at the Joffrey that were all Georgette circle skirts cut like this without any seams. And what happens is you hem this, the girl wears it, and then it gets steamed for the show the next night. As it grows, you can start to see up at the top, as this starts to grow, I start to lose the columns in the skirt. So every time you zip something off of the bottom, you start to flatten out the top. And then what'll eventually happen with one cut this way is in like in a year of shows or in a week of rough shows, you're going to have all these folds right at the front of her body, and the side is going to slowly get really, really flat. So it starts to not look like a nice full circle anymore. And if I went over with the iron and steam this, actually, let me just yank on it a little bit. You'll start to see how fast it grows. And this is a good quality piece of silk that I'm whacking into. Let's see now if I can get it. That's a 6. Look, just by pulling on it, just by pulling on that, I was able to get it to grow a whole nother inch. So that's why over the years I've come to make them with some gores in them, but you don't have to. Let's recut this same shape, our little waist here again, but we're going to cut it just a little bit smaller so that we can kind of see see how the woven fabric grows when you cut the waist out. So actually, I'm going to just cut I'm going to just cut like a square circle skirt. Those are fun, where it's like a rectangle. So we can just mess with the waist. It's also pretty to like cut 2 or 3 different shapes of rectangle and layer them all together. You get all this really cool stuff happening. So what did I do before I did 13? I'm going to try 11. So the thing is, and I know somebody's probably already typing, well, what's the ratio that we just use every time? You just have to test it out, because I guarantee every fabric is going to work completely different. I'm battling with the fan. So my little 13-inch girl, it grew quite a bit. So we're going to see if we can get away with an 11-inch hole. This is a little slappy-dappy, but now let me cut my 11-inch hole. Put a little slit in it so we can pull it on. Take this one off. Now, if this wasn't having a little split in the back, we would have to make it the size of her hips. But check it out. That one fits much, much closer, that circle. So I was able to cut this actual circle 2 inches smaller, and it fits the waist much better than when we cut the 13-inch one. Remember earlier I held it over and I had all this room I was able to yank out to the side. When I hold it now, I'm getting just a tiny little bit of room instead of a whole bunch of room. So that's something to think about. Okay, let's do on our miniature girl kind of the beginning of cutting it with gores. And actually, I'm going to hold this up too. So look, really quick, when you cut just a circle, it starts to kind of square up like an oblong donut, like the way the bias grows. It'll just drive you nuts. But if you can hem it every day, hem it every day. But then the stretch mesh works really great. And actually, we just made a bunch of jersey circle skirts. It's called ITY or Itty Jersey from Spandex House. That hangs really nice, and the bias doesn't grow at all. I think it's something about the way a knit works versus the way a woven fabric works, but I don't really know. Okay, so now let's go back. So we've got our little girl. I'm back to my original quarter, you know, like our cardboard poodle skirt here. What I'm going to do, instead of doing a skirt in 1 solid piece or 2 solid pieces, I'm going to cut my quarter into 8ths. So if I take my quarter and I fold it in half, actually it might show better. I can illustrate it better on this one. So if I've got my half and I fold it, then I've got a quarter. And if I fold it again, I've got 8ths. And we're going to cut out one of these in 8ths. And I'm going to show you something that you can think about and try out. But this, what I'm going to show you is stolen right from the Victorian age. When they made their walking skirts, they always cut, not always, but the general rule is that you have a piece of straight grain up to a piece of bias. So these would be the seams of my skirt. And I'm going to sew this together here in a second. These would be my seams where I put the notches. And we're going to say that on the right side of every piece is my straight grain. No ifs, ands, or buts, the whole way around. So this is a half circle. Now imagine you've got a whole circle. So what that does is it gives the straight of grain piece is holding up every bias piece. So I've got straight of grain here. Then here, I've got some weirdo bias. So my straight piece is going to be the buddy to hold up my bias piece. So what I'm going to do, actually, I gave myself that little notch. I'm going to give myself another one somewhere at the bottom. You can do a notch in the middle. You can do 2 notches. But I'm going to put the same notch on the other side of my piece. And that's how I'm going to figure out how to hook stuff together. So now we have 1/8 of a pattern piece. So this would be times 8 to make one whole circle. Oh, something else just popped in my head before I get any further. A half circle skirt is also very pretty. So using that ruler, if you were, if I don't say it now, I'll forget. If you've got a 32-inch waist and you want to make a half circle skirt, you would just cut only a half circle and you would make the whole 64. So if you're cutting a half circle skirt, your whole has to be twice of your waist or hip, whatever measurement you're using, because you're only dealing with 1/2 of the whole. Yeah. Okay. So you guys sound pumped, right? Sabina, Lauren, like you're real excited about circle skirts. Let's show everybody those hats. Throw those over here. Yeah. Lauren's on Nutcracker hat duty today. Look at how fun that is. I'm a Nutcracker hat. Just foam and stuff from the buckets. These are going to be a lot of fun. Okay, I'll give them back. So now I'm going to cut 8 gores out of, I'm going to cut 4 in pink. The pink and the mint that I have here are the exact same fabric. So I'm going to just cut this like a candy cane so that we can kind of illustrate what's going on a little bit better. A pink and green candy cane. And I'm going to do a whole half so that we can see one whole side, how it's hanging on the body. Now, in full size, you would figure out what your seam allowance is. So if you want to French seam this together, you might be adding a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'll show you guys all a Matera seam before we go, which is really helpful way to finish this off. For that, you probably just need like 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, we have a question.
With the half circle, if the waist is 24,
yep,
you cut 48.
Yep, somebody was just clarifying how to make a half circle skirt. So if your waist is 24, you need a 48-inch circle, but you're only using half of it, so you end up with 24. And I'll actually, let me grab the book. This book, so that ruler, you can only go up. So on the ruler that we've got, you're kind of limited. You can only do a half circle skirt up to up to a 33-inch waist. So if your waist was bigger than 33, that couldn't do it. But this draping for apparel design by Helen Joseph Armstrong, let me just show you this amazing chart. They have just worked out all of the pi times radius squared, or whatever that formula is. And there's also calculators online to do it. But where is it? Look at this. She's got a chart in here that goes for your waist measurement from 1 inches to 50 inches, or a flounce or a wrist. You know, a flounce is a circle skirt on your hand, or however you want to think about it. But she's got a half circle, a 3/4 circle, and a full circle. So if I wanted to make a 3/4 circle for a 28-inch waist, my radius is 5 3/4 minus a smidge. You'll see that she has 5 1/2 plus, 5 3/4 minus. Instead of like giving the like point, she's giving you like the scooch measurements in here. But this is a good book, and it shows a lot of good stuff. And actually, I shouldn't have flipped away from that page. She in here somewhere Oh, she doesn't show it in this book. It might, oh, here it does. Here's where, you know, we were talking about sometimes your circle doesn't fit on the fabric and you just got to whack off a piece. She's showing you how to deal with that. And the other cool thing too here is she shows you a couple different ways to do a wrap circle skirt or the mullet circle skirt or a high-low skirt. So this is a really, really helpful book for lots of stuff. And actually, there's a lot of stuff in here that we do flat patterning that she drapes, and it just gives you new ideas for stuff. So this is a good book. Okay, let me cut out. So I'm putting my grain, my straight grain, I'm actually going to cut these two pieces individual, needs to be on the same side. So I'm not going to flip the piece over. You know, you've got a McCall's pattern, you flip it over. When you're doing this, your pattern stays the same way facing up the whole time. And I'm going to just put on like a scant 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on here. And then before I lift this up, I want to mark, don't mark yours with a Sharpie, but I can because it's just a demo. I want to mark those notches so that I can line stuff up. I've seen this go south too, where people just say, oh, you sew from the waist down. Well, look at, can you see already how much longer? There you can see it. Look how much longer my bias piece is. So we're going to be using the straight piece to hold the bias up so that it doesn't slump away. So now, but check this out. So now I cut one piece out. When you do this way, to keep your grain there, you save a ton of fabric because you can fit it in more like a puzzle piece. So my straight of grain is still the same way. Now, if you had a print or something, you might want to keep all the waists to the same side. I forgot to leave seam allowance. Or did I say, you might want to keep the waist all pointing the same way if you've got like some bird of paradise flower or something you're trying to kind of line up. But if your fabric doesn't have an absolute direction, you can nestle it in much better. So now let's cut two in the mint that are just the same. And I'm not flipping my pattern over. So I'm keeping my straight of grain always on the same side. You should iron your fabric before you do this. I clearly didn't. I don't even know what this is from. This is some old stuff. And a great place to get silk is from Preview Textiles in New York. If you've never got their sample set, it's great. They've got charmeuse, georgette, china silk, silk chiffon, silk organza, and then they give a color chart so you can get the same fabrics or you can get the same color in different fabrics. So if you want to line a dress with charmeuse, but you want like an organza overlayer, you can get the same colors from them at the same time. So now I still am keeping my straight of grain straight. Give myself a smidge of seam allowance. So if you did 4 gores, it's gonna be a wonky hem. If you do 4 gores, you'll have a hem kind of like the Batman logo. At every seam, it'll drip down a tiny little bit, but not bad. I can show you what I mean by that. If you did 4 gores instead of 8, at your seams, you get this kind of thing because there's not enough straight of grain structure to hold it up. So 8 gores gets rid of that Batman logo problem. You don't want a Batman logo problem. Thanks, Lauren. You have a great day. Are you done? It's time. We'll see you tomorrow. Cool. Probably like 9:30 is safer.
That's fine.
Right, okay, cool. Okay, I'm gonna sew this together so we can look at it. But why don't, any questions? Jared's checking for questions.
What was the website?
What was the website? Oh, I'll show you guys. Preview Textiles in New York City. I don't think they require you to have a tax exempt number, but I'm not sure. I don't think they do. But what it is, let me show you their main samples. you get, I gotta find the right one. What they send you is a sample card of different fabrics. So here's the main sample card. So we've got charmeuse, crepe de chine, silk stretch, china silk, silk organza, satin faced thicker organza, silk chiffon, on and on and on. And the ones of these that have a dot with them, you can get those same fabrics in all of these different colors. So so if you want a skirt that's a layer of crepe back satin, say you wanted like a dark purple crepe back satin lining, but then you want a fuchsia organza, you can kind of mix and match. Or if you've got a skirt that's multiple fabrics of the same color, you could do, you know, the crepe back satin, and then you could put a layer of chiffon over the top that all matches. You could do crepe back satin with a layer of chiffon and organza flounces and get all the same color. And I have found from working at Houston to Joffrey to where we're at now, these guys pretty much keep the color lots really accurate. They pay a fortune to have somebody somewhere, you know, make this eggshell color 111 the same next year. So if you're recreating something or adding a skirt to a set, you don't buy, you know, it's like sometimes when you buy knitting yarn, you'll buy one roll to finish your scarf and it's a completely different color. The Preview, they're kind of known for keeping their shit together color-wise. Okay, so I'm gonna sew one of these together. And again, we're doing two different colors just so you can see what's going on. But let's look at how you sew this, and actually how you pin this is going to help your success. Yeah. Preview you can buy by the yard. Somebody asked if you have to buy full rolls. You do not. You can just say, I want a yard of something. So I'm going to lay this out before I cut. So I've got a straight and a bias piece. And then I've got a straight and a bias piece. And then, so my straight is always on the right side of my skirt gore. Straight's over here. Straight's over here. Now, my first two, if I just laid this down and sewed from the waist down, this is what's going to happen. We're going to get to the hem, and I'm going to have all of this extra pink here. So use your sewing machine as a helper. Let the sewing machine be in charge of the bias. So if I lay my straight of grain, in fact, let me just, do you see the Sharpie? Here, I got it. This is my straight side. So I'm going to lay my straight on top of my bias. And this applies to just, you'll find other places to use this sewing trick. You want the slinkier thing to be underneath so that the feed dogs, right, the presser foot isn't squishing fabric when it sews. The presser foot is dragging fabric, unless you've got a walking foot. So if we put the bias side towards the feed dogs, it is going to help hold up the straight side. So let's just sew that seam. So my straight of grain is up, is facing the heavens. And I'm going to just do this with like a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Oh, I'm not plugged in. No, I am plugged in.
Oh, maybe the power strip needs to be switched.
No, I think I need a different foot pedal. Sabina, would you bring me a Bernina foot pedal? I think this one just bit the dust. And you know what? When in doubt, turn it off and on. Right? Sometimes that changes things. No. Here, you take that one. Thank you. Sabina's been on an exotic vacation. Yeah. And we're going tonight to see the new Nutcracker movie. I'm excited. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, so I don't need a super short seam. Most machines, I just ramble. Most, like when you turn this Bernina off and on, it defaults to a size 2, which even for fashion sewing is too small. Unless you're going around a corner that you're clipping really close or something, you generally want to sew like one number above whatever half is, or somewhat above halfway. So now So see the pink is biasy and it wants to bubble out here. But the feed dogs, as we're going along, the feed dogs are saying, hey, see, it wants to at every step of the way be larger. But we're not going to let it. And then once we put all 4 pieces together, it'll start to be clearer. I'll finish one of these seams off better here in a second. I need some little bitty scissors. No, I'm good. I'm good. So let me flip this over. So I can't even remember what side did I sew up? The green. So now my pink, and I could press this here before we're done too. My pink that was super duper stretchy there is now being held up by the green. And as we work around our dress, we're not going to lose all the columns, okay? You still will want to hem it some. You're still going to have a little bit of play in the hem, because even though we've held up the bias, there's still bias going on. But once you hem the one with Gores one time, pretty much, you'll be set for life. You won't have to re-hem it. And like stage-wise and theater-wise, I kind of always figure, is my design need to be seamless? Like, is there an advantage or a feeling about it not having seams that really changes something? Then do seamless. Or does the fabric work to not have seams? Or is it going to be a headache to have seams? So just kind of think through each time what it is you're doing. So those dots, matching those notches, super important, because we want to, look, the green just wants to grow and grow and grow. So I'm going to match them up. This one, I'll do what we call a Matera hem, just so you can see this one. Yeah, after Barbara Matera. It's real theatrical. It's something every big shop should know. If they don't know it, then they're winging it. And there's different versions of it, but this is, so to do a Matera hem, which is like a cheating French seam, and it's sturdier, you do a straight stitch first, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do a straight stitch right to the outside of the first straight stitch. And then I will need some scissors, but I'll grab them. So I've done one straight stitch. Now I'm going to go over like a 1/16 of an inch and do another straight stitch right next to that. I need a new needle. Look, it's laddering my silk, but that's all right. It's snagging. Then we're going to cut really close. Does it show? So we did our original straight stitch. Then we did, there it shows better. We did the original straight stitch. Then I went over like a 1/16 of an inch. Now I'm going to just kind of cut off a little bit of seam allowance here. Let me grab some scissors. Oh, you know what? I can use a rotary cutter. Do you see the rotary cutter? Here's the rotary cutter. So everybody knows a French seam, right? You do the wrong side together at like a 1/4 of an inch. Then you flip it over and press it really nice. And then you can trim off a smidge of that original 1/4. Then you re-sew it the right sides together and press it again. But the Matera one, you've got the first stitch, and some people would call this second one a safety stitch. So like, right, the second stitch is keeping the first one from unraveling. Now what I'm going to do is zigzag over to the left side of the stitch we did last. And you can also use this same approach to hem a skirt. You might not need the second row of stitching. And now I am making kind of a shorter stitch. It's like we're serging it, but with the sewing machine. And sometimes a serger won't hold chiffon or organza together. It's too loose. But I find this straight stitch next to an encased straight stitch will usually do it. And this would be called a Barbara Matera finish. So then let's look at that. So what we've got is our original straight stitch, and then the second straight stitch we zigzagged over it. I can draw it on a piece of paper too. So if this is the edge of our seam here, we did a straight stitch here, then we did another straight stitch, then we cut it a little bit off, then we went between the stitches and we went over the edge with a zigzag. And by the zigzag over that straight stitch kind of wraps the fibers around the straight stitch so they'll never pull out. Anybody who's like serged big curves or serged, you know, like around a circle or something knows that the serging will just pull out. That stitch over the stitch will keep that from happening. So this next one, I'm going to just stitch on plain. I'm not doing the fancy one. And then if anybody's like, I don't know what a French seam is, get the Vogue sewing book. If you just look up Vogue sewing book, there's new copies and old copies. They all have the same stuff. I want to pin my pieces together. Then we're going to iron this, look at it, and then I'm going to just do part of a skirt with a cool flounce on it so you guys can start thinking about if you want to make flounced skirts. And a flounce can be something that you sew on later, or it can be something that goes on. Look, this is that piece of pink that I was yanking at that we looked at very first. I've already made it a little bit long. So I've got to ease that in there. And actually, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to let a smidge go off the bottom. Remember, I was pulling on a piece at the beginning, and now I'm wishing I hadn't. Anything with bias too, you've got to treat it like it's delicate before you just go to town and start yanking on stuff. Don't yank on it until it's sewn together. Okay, so I'm going to sew this now from my green side. My pink is a little bit long because I pulled on it. If I was really persistent, I could get that to all fit back on there, which I should. Another thing that this is like is, I don't know if anybody knows the product Hug Snug or used that. Do they still, is that still a thing, Sabina? Hug Snug or seam binding? Somewhere. Yeah. 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 So you can put a little piece of Hug Snug, or if you don't want it to ever grow, a little piece of twill. Some books will say to cut off the selvage, you know, the store-bought edge of fabric. Here, if you look at this, some people will cut off this edge of a piece of silk, and in the seams, if they have a bias seam, they'll measure the length of the pattern in selvage edge and pin that in their bias seam and stitch it in so that the bias seam can't grow. They use the selvage edge like as a tape inside to keep things from growing. Pretty cool. Lots of things you can do. And if anybody does our tiered ruffled skirt, we're going to be starting with an 8-gore understructure where we have got straight to bias skirt pieces. I want that pink to match and squish in there. The dog's been pretty quiet. Okay, I'm going to run over and iron this real quick. You can see if there's any questions. And then we're going to look at it and cut a skirt with a more fullness at the hem. So if anybody's seen our gypsy skirt, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Let me just clip this somewhere. I'll be right back. Oh, now we'll hear the dog. Oh, I'm still connected. That was probably a fun sound. I knocked the microphone off the table. Okay, so let's put this back on now, and we can start to see what's actually happening a little bit better. Let me get a couple pins. So like I said, you still will hem this when it's done. You know, it's not, we're getting rid of some of the growing problems, but we haven't got rid of all of them. So let's look at, this is my bias here, right? So this side of the green is bias, and it doesn't have anybody holding him up. So that's my bias there. He's stretchy. He needs his friend on the other side. But let's look actually at what's happening at the side where the pink, where we've got three pieces actually sandwiched together. My bias side of green is being held up by my straight side of pink. And then my bias side of pink is being held up by the straight side of my green. And if you look at this, I don't know if it shows. Do you remember the first skirt we looked at, the columns, the fullness wasn't very even? Look how even these two columns are already. So this is what we call a column. So the fullness in this skirt that's straight to bias will stay much more stunning than the fullness in a skirt with no seams. It will stay more even the whole way around. And you can, if anybody knows the Dior coat, that's like the lady standing on the long walkway and she's got great big hips and a wool skirt. A lot of those Dior skirts were cut like this so that they could keep all the columns real nice and slick. So this side is long because it doesn't have the buddy holding him up. So if you continued around, you could also do this into 16ths. If you did it into 16ths, you'd have even nicer, even columns. So the more structure in this skirt, the more even, well, it's not really structure, but the more stability, the stability in here is going to help all that lay even. Any questions? Like, did that like give somebody an eye opener? Waistband on this, you just, if you want to put elastic in there, just make a rectangle that fits your waist, do the elastic plus whatever your seam allowance is, put your rectangle on right side together, flip it up and, you know, flip your rectangle up and stick elastic in there. Do a placket however you want in the back. And remember, if it's a pull-on dress, if this is a pull-on skirt, you've got to make it the hips or close to the hips. Let me show you a modification now on this very basic thing, but that you can have a lot of fun with. I'm going to do it on this little girl, or this little alien body. I don't know if it's a girl or a boy. I'm going to make a couple skirt gores that have a little more interest to them. So let me grab and measure her. Come here, you. So, and the length, it's whatever you want. You know, if you're going to the floor, you've got more to deal with. But I'm going to just make a part of a skirt where we're going to go just to like her knee, but we're going to make it a little more playful. So 22 is my waist, and I'm only going to, you know what, I'm only going to make it 15 inches long so that we don't have to spend a bunch of time cutting. And actually, what did I say, 22 and 15? We don't need this. Sabina, in that fabric tower over there, there's a short roll of like crinkled rainbow organza stuff from Midsummer Night's Dream. It's short. See if you can find that. I think that'd be fun to cut this skirt out of. Yeah, it's short. Like, I don't even know if it clears the barrel. What did I say, 22 by 15? Okay, so I'm going to use my little jig again. And I'm going to make, so we're going to do 8 gores, but I'm going to just show you some of the fun stuff you can do with gores. That's the stuff. Oh, I guess it's not as rainbow as I thought it was. I thought it was like really colorful. It's muted rainbow. Sad rain, like dreary day rainbow. So I'm going to find 22 on my little my little ruler here. Now, we make these suckers in small batches. So if anybody orders this today, we've got like 2 in stock. So you might be getting a note from me saying it's back ordered, but we will eventually get it. And we're learning that our post office is really fussy for some reason with Australian addresses, or even some I've found in America. We've got some stuff back that they're like, we want the complete zip code. I just think it's Chicago being awful. So now I'm going from that circle I drew first, and I'm going to go down. We're going to make, let's do 16-inch skirt. So now I'm going to mark out 16 inches. And the little playful thing I'm going to show you, you can change. You can really do a lot with it. So let's see. So now from where my pinhole was, that's where my 90-degree angle is. But I'm going to deal with just, so that's 1/4 of a circle. And we're going to turn it into an 1/8. Now, we've done, actually thinking of Midsummer Night's Dream, we have done quite a few dancy dresses with gores where we don't support the bias, but it grows evenly the whole way around the skirt. So I'm going to show you some, so that's 1/4. I'm going to turn it into an 1/8. I'm going to show you kind of what I mean by that. And the best way is to just get a dress form and start playing with stuff. So if you want to just, if something goes around their body 8 times evenly, it's going to be cool no matter what happens at the seams or the intersections, right? It's just going to be neat looking because repetition is neat looking somehow. This one, I'm going to say, let's put the bias down the center. This is going to be just a cute little playful dress. Then, instead of having this much fullness, instead of having the fullness radiate evenly down, I'm going to make the bottom kick out or flounce a little bit more. And a flounce can also be, like a circle that's, like a flounce is really a circle skirt. You can put a flounce, you can use a flounce like a ruffle. Boy, I did a terrible job describing that. But check this out. So what I did is I cut an upside down L into here, and then I'm going to swing this out and tape it down. And that's how you start to get the circle that's got, some people, I think it's called in some books a tulip edge. So if you want to make a tulip edge, you just decide how far down, then you cut it and swing it out. Then you fill all of this in. And then actually, if you want to get even more precise with it, that piece that I cut into an L, like look, if I stick this under here right now, you'll see I'm going kind of like this. My hem isn't quite even. You could measure that same distance down on your pattern paper. The other thing you could do is split your L one more time and retape him down so that you're getting a more even slash and spread. So you could do this same on both sides, and that starts to make a tulip, which makes even more fullness in columns. The other cool thing you can do is you can make a tulip with a tulip. So we've got like a little bit of extra fullness coming out here. I can split it again like that, and I can fan it out even more so that like the last part of my bottom is even fuller. Tape that down. Look, you can just totally go nuts with this. You can, in fact, you can keep splitting. So imagine that I've got a pencil. Imagine I have a pencil on the end of this. You can keep splitting until you end up with this skirt pattern that looks like that. So should I draw that? Let me draw that.
What would that actually do to the fabric?
What would it just makes fullness.
Okay.
Yeah. Jared said, what would that do with the fabric? It's just, it makes it fuller, or more like a flamenco dress, or more like a ballroom dress, or more like a really dancy evening gown. And so this, we would do the same on both sides, and we would say, we don't care what happens to all the weird bias and stuff, because we've got a neat thing going on. And pattern making wise, if the pattern is neat, I guarantee you it's going to hang neat. So you could make that. That can be a pattern. Does that make sense? Is somebody on? Somebody say, yeah, I got it, and then I'll show you the next thing. So you could do something like that on both sides, and you decide where down from the waist does it break. Another cool thing, kind of with that idea in mind, is if you've got a circle, right? You've got a circle that's your hem of your skirt, and then you've got a circle that's your waist, and then we've got our 8 gores. Another fun thing to do is to say that that this fullness doesn't happen at the same height everywhere. You can make it go down like stairs. So you could have a little fullness swing out at the front or wherever, and then make it lower and lower and lower as you work around to the back. You could do the opposite. You could do one that's high, one that's low, one that's high, one that's low. Possibilities never ending.
When doing those extreme curves,
yeah,
where do you focus on straight of grain?
When you start doing this stuff, the straight of grain is in the middle of your piece. So if you start doing whack-a-chewy stuff, if you want to get real whack-a-chewy, I would probably do a 16 gourd skirt. Well, but it will work for an 8 gourd skirt too. But if you're doing this crazy stuff, put your grain line down the center so that there's stability in the middle of each piece. But if you want just a fondant icing circle, do the straight to bias, straight to bias. So let's cut out one that's kind of, let's cut out one that's whack-a-chewy. But another thing you can do is put the interesting thing just on one edge. So the one we just looked at, you would have both, you would have it symmetrically interesting. Another thing, so I'm going to put actually, that's not my grain line. Don't look at that. My grain line is going to be over here. I lied. This is my grain line. Then I'm going to split my piece in half. I'll sew a little of this to put on the kid, and then that's where we will say, thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to do that. But what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to keep this side always on the straight, and I'm going to split something weird onto the other side. So my length, my seam to seam, I haven't changed the length, but I've changed the shape of one side. And you get, with this, you'll start to get these like little trumpety curls that hang vertically down. And I want to show you that because it's really fun. So instead of making both sides of something interesting, like we just did with the one that was like a snail, you can make one side interesting as long as you've got a notch to match and you have the same length on both sides. So let's cut out 4 of these and sew them together and see. Oh my gosh, this stuff is so heavy. This has got metallic thread in it. It's really cool. It costs a ton too, but it's just sitting there in the box, so we might as well use it. So I'm going to cut 4 of this shape out and sew them together. So one weird side will get sewn to every not weird side. And actually, if I rip this off, I can cut a couple at a time. I'm going to cut all 4 at the same time. 1, 2. Oh, maybe they'll fit. They might not fit. Ooh, this smells like a grandma's addict. So I'm keeping my straight of grain, like we started with, always on the same side. And actually, another cool person, if you can look up their fashion, would be Madeline Vionnet. She did a lot of this kind of fun stuff with bias and similar stuff in the like late 20s and early 30s. So I'm keeping my straight on that side, but I might have to shrink my skirt in just a little bit because I don't quite have enough fabric. I'm gonna just cheat and take a little fullness out of my big section. Don't cheat like I am. I'm just doing it so it fits on my fabric. But you'll see what we're doing here. So here's my crazy side with all sorts of weird bias going on. There's my waist. And I'm just going to slap this together. You'll want to pin it much better than I'm going to. Don't do as I do, do as I say. Oh, that's nice stuff. Then I am, even though I'm going to wang this together, I'm going to mark that spot that I'm trying to line up. Maybe I'll pin that part. But what you get kind of with this is like cones hanging at one side of each seam. But if you repeat it 8 times, people will be like, wow, how unique and cool. Like, I don't know why on Project Runway they don't just make tons of variations on circle skirts. You could do this all day long. Keep making versions of circle skirts. So now I've got my straight edge to my weird edge. So I'm sewing a straight edge to a weird edge. And I'm going to just kind of pray that I can get my notches to line up. And also, as I'm doing this, if you hold the top and let the bottom kind of ease its way in, the feed dogs, so my notch was off by like an inch, but I'm letting the feed dogs, there, I got my notch almost to line up. The feed dogs will ease it in. Same thing here too. Look, I've got like an extra inch on my under one. If I just hold the top and let the bottom slide, it will, and then it will all line up. And it should all line up without puckers. This is a pucker-free thing. So now I'm going to find my next weird, now I've got a weird curvy edge, and I'm going to put the straight edge again to my weird curvy edge. We've done some Drosselmeyer capes with this straight to bias stuff too. It works pretty well. Oh, I went drunk. Hang on. Again, I'm letting the feed dogs ease my bottom line. If anybody in this class has ever had the treat to meet our friend Tom, he's writing a book. It's going to be fun. All the bodice stuff that I dribble out, he is putting into book format. And if our bodice book goes well, we're going to just be telling everybody we've got Kickstarters going for every kind of book under the sun. Because I try to show you like stuff that's in books, but with different variations. And Tom is smart enough, he's pretty brilliant. He's able to kind of like decipher and write it out step by step. Better than some of the existing step-by-step things we've run into. So we're pretty excited. That lined up. With, you know, if you've got a piece of striped fabric or something with a weird big flower, you can really use the pattern, you know, the motif in your fabric to do cool stuff in a skirt too. Like if we were doing this with straight stripes, you'll have a straight stripe next to a crazy stripe on each piece. Let's hang this up on the little girl. She needs a Forrest Gump brace on one side. She's got a little crooked. So I just love the way this, just anything that you repeat somehow works out. You just gotta make sure you line parts up and then, you know, make a plan and stick to it. And you'll be surprised. So each one of the full side is making kind of a big curly Q. I don't know how to really show it any better, but can you guys kind of see what's going on? It's got each one of the full ones is falling with a big twist. Yeah, or show underneath actually. So there's my straight seam is hanging straight, and then each of the full sides is curling underneath. And actually, I'll just lift her up. Can you see up her skirt? Point it right up her dress. See, you can see that there's all kinds of playful stuff hiding in there. So when this would twirl, even though we can't make her twirl, as this shape opens up, when she spins, you're gonna get kind of waves going on at the hem that you're not having in other parts of the skirt, because we will have made it more than a circle. So anything that's a circle, when it's rotating, will only stand straight out. But if you want it to go, you need beyond a circle at the hem. Otherwise, it will just come out like a plate on a table. Boy, I should have done my hair today. Does anybody have any questions? I hope you found this fun, because I think there's a billion things you can do with this stuff. I mean, we could have a camp here for a week where all we did was make variations of a circle skirt, and we would discover something new every single day.
I have a question.
Yeah, Jared has a question.
If you did all the gores
Yeah.
on bias,
Yeah.
how would that affect this?
Jared says, what if you do with the centers on bias?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you do all the gores on bias, what will start to happen is your skirt, so he's asking, I think, what happens if you take, here's a gore. If you take a gore and actually cut the gore on bias that way, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you do this, you get a skirt that will snug towards the hips like a Chinese finger trap and then open up. So that's another thing you could play with. Make a little one and see what happens. But if you've got bias going on up here through the body, bias acts kind of like a finger trap, which is why we put some pieces of a bodice on bias. And I think it would actually twist, but evenly. I think it could look pretty cool. Like it'd be fun to make 16 gores, all cut on the bias, yeah, and just let it kind of work its way around. Another one that people, that actually made me think of one last thing. This is the last thing I'm showing you. That people try to figure out and kind of get stuck with is how to make a candy cane. So you would just draw your gores like this and then figure out what part of each one goes on to the next. Do you guys see what I'm showing you here? So that you can have a skirt, like a dawning of the age of Aquarius. Is there a name for that? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Where the panels swoop around. I don't know what it's called. But that's how you would do that. You just draw your two panels and draw in your swoop. But what's going to be important is that you still assign a grain line to the same side of every one of those panels, and definitely give yourself notches so that you're lining stuff like this up evenly. If you're not lining it up evenly, that's when you get buckles and puckers and stuff. So there's a name for it, and I can't think of it. It's like twirl something. If I find it, I'll post it on our student page.
One last question.
Last question, while I grab the puppy.
Do you have to make the back a little longer?
Oh, somebody asked if you have to make the back a little longer. You absolutely can. You would what I would do is make the whole thing a little bit longer, and then when it's done, hem it on a person or shorten the front. But if you buy like a lady's skirt pattern or look in a pattern making book, right? You start with a block, and then you end up with the hip like that, and then you have the back of the skirt like that, and then there's a dart, and then there's the center back. Then you do this, then you drop the center back down like an inch or an inch and a half and blend it up like that. So you could do the same thing with your circle skirt, but you would draw your gores with the longest, draw the longest thing, then when you've got your whole circle open, come back and take away from the front and angle it down towards the back rather than making the back longer. It's easier to whack it off the front than it is to add it to the back. But for something like this, I would just make the whole thing, let it spend the night, and then I would hem it. Should I get out the puppy now? It's puppy time. Oh my God, come here. Come here, Elizabeth Taylor. Did you pee in there? I hope you didn't pee in there. Did you pee in there? No, he didn't. Huh? He already went.
I know.
Oh, I thought I would panic. Look at this baby. Ah, he's so cute. Look how long her arms are. She's gonna be so goofy. Okay, thanks everybody. Since this one was under 2 hours, the recording will probably be ready tonight. At the latest, I'll send it out tomorrow morning. Thanks. Wave, Wayne, you're on camera. That's Wayne. He works next door. Okay, shut her down. Oh, look at the dog on camera. She's so cute.